Welcome everyone to another HVAC Insider Series brought to you by Breezy. I'm your host as always, CJ Todd, and it is a pleasure to be here with you all. You know, most HVAC companies, they invest in training, but very few can actually measure how it's working or if it's even working at all. When onboarding feels inconsistent and technician growth stalls out, it's usually because there's not a clear way to track performance or progress. So in today's masterclass, we are joined by Danielle from Upskilled, and it's all about changing that fact, right? We'll show you how to build a simple, data-driven training system that uses KPIs and dashboards to turn technician development from guesswork into growth. Now, my friends, I'd love to introduce you to Breezy before we get into today's content and let you know how our purpose-built HVAC field management software helps you to connect what's happening out in the field with the KPIs that we're going to be talking about today. So Breezy gives you real-time visibility into the numbers that actually matter. Things like technician performance, customer experience, membership growth, all things that can help make smarter data-driven decisions every single day. Simply put, Breezy turns field activity into measurable insights that you can actually act on. And our users are proving that it works, right? Breezy contractors saw a 19% median year-over-year growth, and that's about double the industry standard. I'd like to just get everybody a little bit acclimated to what the HVAC Insider Series show is all about. Maybe this is your first time joining us, but we bring the industry's most acclaimed experts to give you the tactics, the strategies, the tips and tools to really help you grow a profitable business. And we do that 3 times per month. So almost every week, we're offering these free training programs. Absolutely no obligation to be a Breezy customer to tune in, join us for free, and just learn some new stuff. So Danielle is the founder of Upskilled Consulting, and she specializes in helping HVAC shops build structured onboarding systems, clear career paths, and training dashboards that makes technician growth really measurable, right? So she was named to ACHR's 40 Under 40 for her innovation in workforce training, and she's worked with contractors nationwide to turn inconsistent training into consistent results, right? That's why we're here today. So a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how to identify the KPIs that truly measure technician growth. And then we're going to look at some common onboarding gaps and how to fix them, right? So from there, we'll explore how to use dashboards to make training more objective, more actionable, and how to align technician goals with the overall company performance. As always, we'll wrap up with a live Q&A session between me and Danielle, and we'll introduce our next guest for the HVAC Insider Series. So as a special thank you for being here today, Danielle is offering up her Upskilled Technician Training and Self-Assessment Guide, which is a tool to help you pinpoint skills gaps for your technicians, set clear KPIs, and turn your training into measurable growth. So if you wouldn't mind scanning that QR code, it's going to take you to her OneDrive where you can download that free resource right now. I'll also send that out to you as a follow-up along with today's recording a little bit later this afternoon. So Danielle, we're really excited to have you. I'm going to shut my big mouth and let you take it away.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with you guys today. So huge thank you to Breezy for this collaboration. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I've been doing a technician training strategy for years now, and it's really fun to kind of open some eyes and see some new things that maybe we can think about in ways we haven't thought about before. So I'm excited to dive in. So we're going to talk about KPIs that drive technician growth today. So when we think about driving technician growth, I am gonna kind of outline some key outcomes that we're hoping to take away from today. So with our next kind of few minutes together, we're going to learn how to identify the right KPIs because there's a million different KPIs out there. So we're going to talk about the right KPIs to measure technician progress and readiness. We're going to talk about simple methods to turn training data into actionable improvement plans. So maybe somebody's not doing so great. Okay, what do we do with that? We're going to talk about how we can use dashboards to make technician development objective. So no more, I feel like they're ready for a promotion or I feel like they're not getting it. We're going to have data and numbers in front of us, which is amazing. We're also going to talk about the connection between onboarding systems and long-term retention for your employees. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to supplement your training with Breezy's real-time data that they can help you pull and kind of pull those reports and build those out. So I've got a lot to cover, so we're just going to jump straight into it. So driving technician growth, I want to think about this in 4 different buckets, if you will. And so I want to start at the very beginning. I want to start about onboarding. And so their first day with you. So we're going to do an activity in just a moment. And I want you to think through this activity. If your company has ever experienced this, have you ever welcomed a new employee and kind of had them experience some of these obstacles? Or maybe you were a new hire yourself somewhere starting a job, and maybe you experienced some of these. So let's talk about, where is somebody's loyalty to the company? So let's talk loyalty, because we hear a lot right now. People are leaving within their first week, or people don't want to work anymore, or maybe they try it out for a few days and it wasn't what they thought it was, so they're out. So let's talk about that loyalty to your company when they first start. So I want you to imagine that you are a new hire that has just got an offer. You're a technician. You've got an offer to start your first day at a new job. And so you 10 loyalty bucks to this company. Okay. So you're excited, you're ready to go start your new role with them. So you're going to arrive to the office on Monday morning and then standing at the door for about 5 minutes before somebody actually notices you. So maybe, the door's locked, you haven't been given the code yet, and the hustle and bustle's going on so people don't notice you. You don't have the right phone numbers to call. You're just kind of stuck there waiting for somebody. Not the end of the world, but not a great first impression, right? So we're going to lose a loyalty buck. So then someone finally lets you in and they say that they're going to get your boss and to go ahead and have a seat and wait for them. So you watch the hustle and bustle. People are running around. They're getting ready to go out to the field. And 45 minutes later, your manager finally arrives and they're apologizing that it took so long. Like, hey, man, sorry. Thanks for waiting. Mornings are crazy. So thanks for hanging out. So we're going to lose 3 loyalty bucks for that, because that first day, we should know where our employees are going, what's their training agenda, who should they be with, and they're just kind of stuck sitting there waiting for us, and it feels a little unorganized. So now we're down to 6 loyalty bucks. So your first day is going to consist of maybe, assigning your onboarding paperwork, your HR paperwork, all that, and maybe an hour meeting to go over a few policies with your manager. So during this meeting, your manager promises you a 30, 60, and 90-day check-in to see how you're adjusting. Like, hey, we want to see how you're adjusting to this role. Welcome to the team. We'll do some check-ins and we'll see how you're learning and how your training's going. So it's a really positive. So we're going to earn a loyalty buck. Okay, great. Now things are looking up in the right direction. We had a rocky start, but things are getting a little better. I'm getting promised dedicated time to my growth and development. Later, you're going to find out that those 30, 60, 90-day check-ins never take place because your manager got too busy and forgot to schedule them. So we're going to lose 2 loyalty bucks. And so across the table, your manager starts calling technicians to see who you're going to ride with. The first 2 technicians that they called, they're on jobs. They cannot get to you. They're busy. They can't get to you. So finally, after the 3rd technician, somebody is available and they can come pick you up and you can ride out with them. But it's going to be 30 minutes. So you're just going to have to sit there and twiddle your thumbs until they can come pick you up. Sorry. So we're going to lose another loyalty buck. So when we're not organized, we don't have that training schedule, that agenda. We look, again, unorganized. We look like we don't know what's going on and where they should be. And that sets the tone for their vision of our company and our business as a whole, not just being a new hire. So, okay, they finally make it to come pick you up and you start riding out with them. And then after a few hours together, you feel like they've been really dismissive with your questions. They belittle you a little bit. And later they tell you that they're not sure why you got stuck in their truck and that wasn't on their job description. That's not my job. I don't know why they've got me training new hires. Again, lose 2 loyalty bucks. So now we're at 0 loyalty bucks and you have started looking for new jobs. You're online, go into the job postings to see if you can turn in your notice as soon as possible. So again, I want you to kind of think of that experience, and maybe we're not doing all of those things, but I'm sure you have either been a a part of a company that maybe accidentally that happened, or maybe you were the new hire and you experienced that. So you have two new hires doing the same role, but their timeline and their training agenda looks very different from one to the other. So how can we fix that? Well, we can define a 3-week training agenda. We can have a structured, robust training plan. Now, companies will vary. I've had some companies that say I need 2 weeks and that's all the time I can give. And I've had some companies say 6 weeks. That's up to you to kind of see like what works best in your business. My personal favorite is a 3-week training agenda. Another common pitfall is going to be that the mentor, so that person that they're writing out with, that technician that they're shadowing, is trying to remember everything to show that new hire. I see this a lot in CRM. So this is where, having like a Breezy checklist or some sort of training checklist is really going to be impactful. So we're going to combat that with a detailed training checklist. Because what can happen is you can have the same trainer train 2 new hires at different times. And then on that second new hire, they remember, oh, shoot, I didn't tell that last technician about this. So now they're not learning and training at the same pace. They're not gathering the same amount of information during their onboarding experience. So when we provide checklists and training material for them, we make sure that they're getting a consistent experience. And then also drinking from a fire hose. When you start a new job, there is so much information that you have to remember. And I'm not going to say that, I'm going to wave a magic wand and they have less to remember. The reality is that there's a lot of moving pieces to the way your business works, whether it's from employee handbook policies to customer service to actually technical skill set. But one way that we can kind of help support them while they're drinking from the fire hose is through things like robust workbooks. So something that they can refer back to, interactive worksheets, places they can take notes. So our technicians often prefer kinesthetic learning. So they like to learn with their hands. And fun fact that note taking actually falls under that umbrella. So something they can refer back to is really, really great way to support them during onboarding.
I
And
think
so
that's a really great point.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt,
no,
but
you're good.
all the trainings that I go to, I think a lot of technicians did not thrive in a school environment, right? And we all know that, right? And so replicating that school environment in your training is probably going to undermine the whole purpose of it, right? So I was recently at Trade Automation Pros Tap into the Future in Savannah, Georgia. And during our working sessions, they put like fidget spinners and Rubik's cubes and stuff at the table. And it was incredible to see how many people just picked them up and were like messing with them and staying really engaged. It's almost like counterintuitive that you think it would distract, but it really ties them into what's really being taught. So great point.
I love that so much. Yes, so I do a train the trainer series, and we talk a lot about what is kinesthetic learning. And that's one of the points is like, get a fidget box at the front of your room, give them something that they can do with their hands because it helps them retain information. Not everybody, but you'll be surprised how many of those fidgets leave that box very quickly at the beginning of your training. So great call out. I love that. So when you think about those resources like onboarding workbooks, you can see on the left-hand side, kind of flipping through some examples. These are just a few kind of screenshots of worksheets that we've been able to incorporate in onboarding. And so they really cover a vast majority of whether it's your technology, it's your hard technical skills, your customer service, safety, company procedures, all of that gives them something to refer back to while they're learning, and they can keep it for their first 90 days. We can incorporate 30, 60, 90-day check-ins so they don't get forgotten. They're still in that workbook. We're going to flip that page and be like, oh yeah, I need to make sure that that's scheduled. I need to do that. We can incorporate that first 3 weeks daily training agenda. Where am I supposed to be on any given day? And then the really impactful piece that I've found is write out discussion prompts. This has been a game changer in some of the onboarding workbooks that I've done because sometimes you get that awkward silence during drive time. And that new hire doesn't know what they're supposed to ask. And so when you give them prompts and you give them questions, you can exponentially increase the amount of information that they're retaining and that they're absorbing within the same amount of time. So these workbooks can be a really, really amazing resource for that. So
My gears are turning right now because Breezy empowers, the owners and the managers to really get the technicians to run their playbook, right? With reminders, with nudges, with automations. But that starts, after training. That starts when the technician's rolling, right? So I
Yeah.
could see a lot of this being incorporated into the Breezy platform with all those same kind of automations and nudges and alerts and stuff to help with the training.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That would be super, super impactful. I love that. That's a great idea. Awesome. So moving on past kind of onboarding, I want to talk about, we're going to continue driving career path. And this is where we're going to start really getting into KPIs and analytics. And so when we give our employees a clear career path, we essentially are giving them the map so that they can drive the car. So you're going to hear me say that a lot. So kind of in the background, you see a couple visual aids of some ways that I personally like to do it. There's a million different ways you can do this. It's also often referred to as like technician scorecards. To me, it's the same thing. But no longer are you just an apprentice or just a lead. No longer are you a maintenance tech versus a service tech. When you break those levels apart, you can say install apprentice 1, apprentice 2, maintenance 3, service 4. When you break out all of those levels, now you can start defining key metrics. You can start defining thresholds for various KPIs based on what level they are. And so you can kind of see here from a technical skill set, you can define, okay, at a maintenance level 1, these are the key hard skills that you need to know to be successful in that role before you're eligible for promotion. So again, we're building the map for our employees so that they can drive the car. So when we think about the training analytics dashboard, how does that help us? How does that give me clear information on whether somebody's ready to promote or not? And so with the dashboards that I like to build, I like to focus on, like, at the click of a button, I want to be able to see who has missing or expired licenses or certifications, who maybe has a major disconnect between the technician's perception and the manager perception of their technical skill set. And we do that through, digital self-assessments, which I'll get into later. But I also want to be able to see, like, who requires like 911 training before they're running jobs on their own. And then who may be near, qualifying for a promotion. So what we're doing with all of these dashboards and all of these data points that we're adding in here is we're taking the subjectivity out, the emotion, we're taking that out of the decision, and we're making it objective. We're adding data, we're adding thresholds, we're adding metrics. And that, from an HR perspective, your HR team will probably love that, because now you're taking out well, he gets the better calls, or I don't understand why he got promoted when he's only been here for 6 weeks and I've been here longer. You eliminate all of that because now the proof is in the numbers and the metrics in front of you. So I want to take a deeper dive into those purposeful analytics. So that's step 3 in our bucket for driving technician growth. So traditional KPIs, and this is where Breezy's reports are going to come in quite handy, to be able to tell you at the click of a button, what is their average ticket? What's their conversion rate, their membership sales, their revenue, maybe even their review generation, if that's something you track. So those are all really, really valuable KPIs, and those are often what lead our business decisions. But business growth and technician growth are 2 different buckets. So what I want to do is I want to take a minute to kind of share some new KPIs that you can think of that focus on that technician growth that maybe you've never thought about tracking before. So the first one is going to be average job completion time. And so what I like to do with this is to take my standard job. So it might be a cooling tune-up or a heating tune-up. And I want to say, okay, on average, how long should that job take? And I'm talking customer interaction, filling out the report, doing the actual service itself, to pulling out of the driveway. What's the average time? I've surveyed hundreds of people on this, and we all come up with the answer of roughly 1.5 to 2 hours with good conversation built in there with that customer. So a real-time example is when I started pulling this report, I started seeing, okay, who has a vastly lower time and a vastly larger time for their average job. And when I pulled this, I found a technician on my team that at the time had an average. So it wasn't just a one-off inspection. It was an average 17-minute inspection. Had we not pulled that KPI, I'm sure we would have found it, but it would have taken a lot more of clicking through things and a lot more analytics versus us just pulling a report and saying, whoa, that person is way out of bounds. What's going on? And then it can lead you to having deeper, meaningful conversations to figure out why that is. So, average job completion time is a really great KPI you can start tracking if you've not already.
Danielle,
Yeah.
I just saw a kind of a influx of folks come in,
Yeah.
just joining a little bit late. So wanted to let everybody know that the whole full recording is going to be sent out later, about 2 hours after the end of our call. And if you have any questions about, kind of what we talked about before this point, please type them in the chat and we'll get to those.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Awesome. So looking at another KPI we can track is certification compliance. I see this with a lot of companies. We often ask for a certification when somebody first gets hired. Sometimes we don't even do that. So if you're not doing that, I highly encourage you, please start checking your certifications. But when we perform audits, what we've been able to find is that sometimes, especially with their EPA, for example, technicians might come in thinking that they're already certified because they have one type, when really for what you're doing, it requires type 2. And so when you can do, again, at the click of a button, I can see who has what certifications, who do I need to schedule for upcoming trainings, and where can I start supporting that employee. So certification audit is really, really great if you've not already done one, and it can allow you time to, again, schedule that training, get some retests in and things like that. Volume of tech support calls. This is just a small screenshot of the dashboards that I build. This is not going to work for every company. So fair warning, the volume of tech support calls, it's something that I see tracked a little bit more in those larger businesses. But if you wanted to track how often are my technicians calling and asking questions, maybe we have in-house tech support and they're calling, how many times are they calling their manager about an IAQ product? Or how many times are they calling about heat pumps? Well, then you can start collecting that data and you can break it up by equipment. What percentage of our calls are around EACs? Okay, we need to schedule an EAC training. And so you can really start, if you track the support calls that are coming in from your technicians, it can help you develop your training schedule for the next few weeks. So again, that metric might not be for everybody, but if you've got the capacity, it's a really cool one. Technical assessment scores. So this is, again, another screenshot from our dashboards. These names are made up, fair warning. So if these are your people, they're not your people. So what we do is think back to that career map, that map that we're building so they can drive the car. So what we do is we take those skills and say, okay, I want to define what skills make up apprentice one level. And so just in HVAC alone, we've been able to turn it into a self-assessment, which is really, really cool. It can tell us a lot of things, but we've been able to come up with 250 HVAC install skills and over 200 HVAC service skills. And those skills, for the most part, do not overlap. Those are completely different skills. So there's tons of skills out there that I think we often get stuck in the, do they know how to install an outdoor unit? Yes or no? Well, an outdoor unit has, maybe 30, 40 skills inside of it. So can we really get granular and see where their gaps are? And that's what these dashboards tell us. They tell us how much progress they have within a given equipment type or a given, level. So technical assessment scores, again, they're going to guide your training schedule for the future. Accurate recall and callback rates. This is one that I always, it can tell you a lot of really valuable information when done correctly. Oftentimes it requires a little bit of extra work. Our CRMs are often just, if they go back to a job, then it's counted as a recall when it really wasn't at fault of technician. So again, if you've got the capacity to really go in and start tracking what was truly at the fault of the technician and what was the equipment, what happened, you can start giving them, this is a screenshot of a mentorship program that I built for recalls. We had a company who HVAC install alone, their annual recall rate was around 30%. It was high. And so we implemented this mentorship where we had strategic questions. We were figuring out what did we need to ask them? What did we need to do? What did we need to track for their recalls? And we got that rate down in a span of 6 months, down 15%. So it just took a lot of figuring out. It was a lot of the silly mistakes that, again, we're putting out fires. We didn't track this at the time. So it wasn't in front of us, but now it is. And we were able to drop that number down, which is really, really cool. Skill self-assessments, again, I've mentioned these a few times, but I just want to kind of give a real world scenario in this. I had a company that I worked with who, at the time, they just had maintenance and service titles, and they had 15 service technicians. So these 15 technicians were all service techs. They were not doing maintenance tune-ups, they were service diagnostic techs. They completed their self-assessments and the formulas that were in the background and how we broke those skills apart by level. We found that only 13% of the service techs rated themselves as a service tech. So they'd openly told us a ton of training gaps that we'd assumed that they knew, but without that self-assessment, we would have never known that they needed more training on. So I love, love, love self-assessments. They can tell us so much information. So it's a KPI that most companies don't take advantage of, but it can paint a whole picture for you. It's very, very valuable. And then kind of rounding out some of these new KPIs, tool inspections. So again, you can define, are they ready to be promoted to service? Well, do they have service tools? Have we listed out the tools that are required for each level? And of that, have we inspected that their tools are in safe and operating order? Do they actually have the tools that they're supposed to have? The first time that I implemented tool inspections, it was for a massive, massive company. I'm talking 400 technicians. And when we did this tool inspection across the board, 89% of those 400 technicians were missing tools that they needed for their job. Within their job title, 89% were missing tools. So again, we're taking the feeling away, and now we have it in plain paper, black and white. Do they have it or do they not? And so again, these KPIs, you don't have to track all of them, but they can tell you a lot of really cool information in different directions.
Danielle, these new KPIs are incredible, and I feel like they're just going to be an awesome supplement to the KPIs that businesses are already tracking. How did you come up with them?
Yeah, great question. So they evolved over years. So I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for going on about 7 years now, for learning and development, specifically in the trades. And so it was kind of it was very reactive. And so we were finding that, oh gosh, like, well, we can't send Johnny out to this job because he doesn't have the right gauges or he doesn't have this. And so it was a lot of stumbling over these problems that we kept finding of like, okay, well, why this person was with us? He's been on our team. He's a maintenance tech. He's been a maintenance tech for 6 months. Why is he getting so many callbacks on his heat pumps? Well, it turns out he had never had heat pump training, and we just assumed that he had. And so a lot of it was kind of like I kind of had to fall on my face to figure out why it was happening. And so now that's why I'm so passionate about things like these is like helping people stop being reactive and let's be proactive. Let's catch them before their problems. So really great question.
So get your shit together, Johnny, becomes here's how we can get your shit together, Johnny.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And that's the culture you want to build, right? Like you don't necessarily have to hold their hand through everything, but at the end of the day, if you expect them to open the door and know what they don't know, it's not going to happen. Like our jobs as leaders, both in the education industry and into like the GMs of trades, and maybe you're the owner, our job is to meet our employees where they are, and these resources help you find where the heck are they. So,
Right.
yeah.
And the key word that stood out to me there was culture, right? And
Yeah.
so that kind of ties into Elaine's question from the chat. If they know that they're being tracked on their volume of tech support calls, could that backfire? Maybe they don't call when in doubt, so they don't hurt their score. But I think, the answer to that is building the culture of, just support and help. And what's your take?
1000%. 1000%. So I think that's a super great question. And I think it kind of spins into a bigger culture solution. Not every KPI has to be tied with punishment. Not every score has to mean you're in trouble because you didn't hit this. I think a lot of these KPIs and a lot of this information as a learning and development professional, like it's building my map so that I can best support my team. It's not out there to get anyone fired. It's not out there to get anyone in trouble. And so I think a lot of it is how maybe some of these lead to harsher conversations. If they're choosing not to do the job correctly, that's a different story. But I think as long as at the end of the day, your goal is to support them and develop them and grow them, and they can see that, then they typically don't have too much pushback.
Right. And I think that ties back to the fact that, we want to align the technician's goals like in life. with the goals of the company, right? And so how can the company help, Johnny reach that new house that he wants to buy, or finally be able to afford having his third kid, or whatnot. So yeah, definitely agree with what you said there. And Christopher Miller in the chat also asks, when a tech needs tools that are not provided by the company, how can we make sure they have the right tools? Or does the responsibility land on the technician? Maybe you could shine some light on that.
Yeah, great question. And so that's really, I see variable answers in that from company to company. I think at the end of the day, some companies offer tool accounts where they, an X amount per year where they help support them in purchasing their tools that they need. I think some of it does fall on the technician, and some companies even do like a loan program where maybe they front $1,000 or they front the tool bag and take some out of their paycheck. I'm not HR, so I'm not here to give you that answer. It's really up to what your company needs. But what I have seen work well in the tool inspections is, okay, you've got the list. These are all, 40 tools that are required for HVAC service, for example. From there, you can take it a step further and break it down to nice to have, need it within the next 30 days, and 911, how are you doing your job without this, friend? And so then that can kind of help you and the technician prioritize, like if they're missing multiple tools, which one do I need to buy first? So that's one way to kind of help combat that.
For sure. Great answers and great question, guys. Keep them coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the questions. I love it. Awesome. Let's keep going. All right. So I've shared with you a handful of new KPI metrics to kind of track. And so more data, does that mean better performance? If I'm tracking more information, does that mean all of my numbers are going to go up? Unfortunately, the answer is no. More data does not always mean better performance. And so what I mean by that is if you feel like you're drowning in data, I would rather you have 40 KPIs that you have time to track, you have time to read and really understand what the numbers are telling you, and then create an action plan of support. Then I would rather you have 100 KPIs and you sit there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at your computer and you're just crunching numbers all day long, that you finally get all your numbers input and it's 5 o'clock, it's time to go home. You didn't have time to react to what data you're seeing. You didn't have time to support your team. So more data does not always mean better performance. You need to kind of balance it out with your capacity. So my job here is really just kind of getting you to think outside the box. And maybe that means, kind of different people own different data points. I've seen that work really well in companies. Some roles might master recall tracking more than, average ticket tracking or whatever the case may be. So I think there's lean on your team and kind of see where they can support you with that too. So every KPI you track should have an action plan of support for when the goals are not being met. And this goes back to that question of not every KPI needs to be about punishment, and not every KPI needs to be you're in trouble if you don't hit this. But every KPI needs to have an action plan. How can we as the business leaders and as the leadership of the company, how can we support them when they're not hitting goal? And so how we're going to do that, I call it a KPI analytics playbook. So I went through this for fun one day and came up with like 25 KPIs and created action plans for all of them. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through how to do that right now. So the first step is you're going to identify the KPI you're tracking. We're going to pick one KPI at a time. We're going to define the goal thresholds. I would encourage you, if you've got the tier levels, by breaking that goal up. The more tenured technicians tend to, have a little bit higher or a little bit harder goal than maybe a newer technician. But if nothing else, just start with a goal. Like, what is passing, if you will. And then we're going to create the action plan for improvement. So I'm going to walk through an example with you here. And so for my example, I chose truck inspections. So again, something we do in our dashboards where we can give scores to truck inspections. We're taking out the feeling of like, wow, you have a really dirty truck, my friend. And now we're putting a score with it of, you have a beautiful truck. You scored a 9 out of 10. You scored a 10 out of 10, whatever it might be. So we've defined the KPI as truck inspection scores. Our goal is going to be an 80% or higher to pass. We've set that threshold. And now we're going to create the action plan of support. So somebody got a 79% or lower. What do we do to help them? Well, we're going to set a reassessment date. We're going to define what was wrong via a checklist or a form and give them that information so they've got time to correct it. And we're going to connect with the appropriate parties. So if their truck was over and needs an oil change, we're going to connect them with the fleet team to get them an oil change. If they're missing a tire jack, we're going to get them the resources that they need to help, boost that score with them. So again, we're identifying the KPI, we're defining the goal, and we're creating an action plan.
In this specific example, would there be like it's a 10-point inspection and each is worth 10? And so that's like 100%, or am I overthinking that?
So what I like to do, I've done them a handful of different ways. Some companies are really married to their truck inspections, and I'll just kind of make some math magic out of what they've got. I like to do at minimum 10 checkpoints. You either got it or you didn't. So your dash is either clear or it's not. You get the point or you don't. And so I typically do out of 10, and we kind of get out of a percentage that way. But I've had some companies who are like, I want to check every brake light. I want to check the tire pressures. I want to check everything. So again, we just kind of put some math with that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So while we're, creating those support plans, what we're really doing is we're eliminating the excuses. You've heard skill or will, right? So like we're eliminating the excuse. We're taking the horse to water. We can't make it drink. We're giving the map. We can't make them drive the car. And so it's eliminating those people who might not be the best fit in our culture. Maybe they're the ones in the back of the room not caring about anything. They will weed themselves out when you start following through these processes. And so finally, super, super quick, the fourth section I like to talk about driving technician growth is leadership development. There's a million different things you can do with leadership development. I'm going to focus on just one tiny, tiny layer. And so I want to talk about the weekly department meeting training. So how many of you guys host your technician trainings during your weekly department meeting? So every Tuesday, we got all of our technicians come in, and they come in at 7 a.m. and 7 to 8 a.m. we do a training or run some numbers with the company. Well, I want to do some math with you really quick on that. So assume you have 10 technicians at an average of $20 an hour. 1 hour of weekly training costs you roughly $200 a week. For 52 weeks a year, you're paying over $10,000 to have that 1 hour meeting each week. And I'm not here to tell you that meeting, don't have that meeting anymore. I'm here to tell you that number should kind of shock you. We need to make sure that if we're paying that much money, that we're investing in really impactful meetings and impactful training. And so let's say these three on the right here, they could do this skill in their sleep. You made it a training and they've done it 1,000 times. They don't need to learn how to program a thermostat. They could do it in their sleep. Well, we've just paid them to sit there, again, $20 an hour for an hour of training, $60 a week. Now we've wasted $3,000. On the flip side, you've got this skill's too advanced for them. Maybe you're talking about changing TXV, and my friend, they are still just trying to learn a heat pump from an AC. Like they are not ready for the technical stuff yet. Like they're just trying to learn what the hammer and the screwdriver. So for these three technicians, again, $60 a week, you've wasted $3,000. So if your training sessions don't use training analytics, you're not using data to schedule your trainings, you're wasting money. So in this scenario, upwards of $6,000 a year. And again, those numbers are going to vary, but I just wanted you to kind of see an example of how expensive those meetings can be, but also like when built with a purpose, they still have their value. They still have a worth for sure. So how do we do that? Final topic. You're going to funnel your training. So this is my catchphrase. I will scream this from the mountaintops until I am blue in the face. Our technicians are not all in the same place. So why are we training them at the same pace? So again, our technicians are not all in the same place. So why are we training them at the same pace? So we're going to start funneling our trainings. And to do that, we're going to select the appropriate audience. Select who needs to be in your training. And maybe that's through their self-assessment results. Maybe that's through their levels or scorecards, an onboarding assessment, callback analysis. Maybe you get all your new hires in the room, or succession planning. Maybe your future leaders, you want all of them in the room together. So you're going to select your audience. We're not going to shotgun trainings to the entire team anymore. Then We're going to prepare that training with structured lesson plans, dedicated time to plan. Don't just go in there and wing it. There's so much more. That could be, 5 more master classes on prepared and gamified training. But just give yourself time to actually plan it out and make it a purposeful training, and define your training analytics, define the metrics you're going for. And then finally, you're going to engage them. So you're going to engage them with gamified activities, retention analysis, multimodality delivery methods, which just means, those auditory learners, those kinesthetic learners, those visual learners. We're going to layer our trainings to incorporate all of that. Again, I could go into a masterclass for that for years. So if you have more questions on any of the select, prepare, or engage, please, please, please let me know. But again, the end of the day, my goal is that you're funneling your trainings. Stop shotgunning the training to everybody and make it more impactful for the people who need it. And that, my friends, is my masterclass.
I'm just absolutely blown away with, the breadth of knowledge that you have, both technical and from, a business development standpoint and training. Like, everything is so incredibly put together, and I'm really looking forward to how Breezy and Upskilled work together in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's so many connections that can be made. I'm super, super pumped.
Absolutely. So I wanted to get into a little bit about Breezy and our upcoming launch of a new dashboard that we're putting together. So, by show of hands in the chat, like, who knows who Gary Elix is? Founder of iMarket Solutions, from development inside of Linux. He was a consultant for EGIA Contract University for years. He's just an incredible brain in the industry. And we are partnering with him to create a new dashboard to show everything that you need to see, from the time the technician gets out into the field, what they do in the home, and what they're generating, gross profit per man day, total sales. This is a key metric breakdown section here. And then we really get into week over week gross profit per man day and how that's changing. And then break down specifically per technician the amount of jobs they're running, their total sales, their average sales, their gross profit, how many man days they're running or woman days they're running, and their gross profit per man day. And then there's also broken down by department. So you see installation, service, maybe you have a plumbing and electrical division. You'll see that there, how many jobs, total sales, etc. And then you can kind of click into the labor cost dashboard and understand what's happening out in the field there to supplement kind of your training. And then daily performance as well in this really cool calendar view. So you can see, what you generated on Wednesday at a snapshot, of this week. So this is launching next week inside the Breezy platform, and something that we're super excited about. I'd love to now get into the Q&A session, because we've had a lot of really great questions in the chat today, Danielle. Danielle, for a company that's already tracking KPIs like revenue, conversion rate, what's the best way to start layering in training metrics without overwhelming the team?
Yeah, super good question. My friends, when I first started this, I overwhelmed the heck out of my team. I was like, hey guys, we're so excited. Here's everything. And they didn't know what to do. They kind of got decision paralysis. They're like, I don't know where to go. So I think what I've learned over the years now is we kind of throw a flag and we say, okay, we pick a date. When do we want this to be live and fully accountable? And then from there, I like to kind of build timelines backwards. So maybe we spend this week focusing on this KPI, and then the next week we're going to layer in and add this next one, and then this next one, until we get to that date. So I think that kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time helps having that timeline.
And then, you're, for example, implementing something brand new with a new company. Are you training the owner and the managers first and then kind of rolling it out to the technicians?
Yeah, 1000%. So what I like to do, everything's customized to your company. So it's not just like hey, I'm gonna order this and then it's there. So we really take what you're already doing, what works well, and then we pair it with some additional resources. And so like in doing that, it's a lot of management owner training first, and then we start kind of the timeline. They'll intertwine at the same time. So all the managers and the owners will always be a few steps ahead of the technicians.
For sure. Yeah, Chris says gradual process or
Yeah.
gradual progress in the chat. So
Oh yeah.
I
Rome
appreciate
wasn't
that.
built in a day, my friends.
Absolutely not. Yeah, so again, I have a couple questions that I'm going to ask. So if anybody else has any questions, please type them into the chat and I'll moderate those. But we've got a few senior techs, let's just say, who are great in the field, but not as open to being evaluated or scored. How do you introduce KPIs and self-assessments without creating that pushback that I think a
Yeah.
lot of people might feel?
Really, really great question. So we kind of hit it from the culture perspective. So I'll kind of flip it a little bit towards the training or the development side of things. And this is one thing that I hit really hard when we launch self-assessments. I think it's really critical how you deliver that message to your team. Because if you come in and you say, "Hey friends, I want you to take this assessment and it's going to tell me what level you are. It's going to tell me what tier you are." If they're going to associate that with pay or a title, they're going to say, I'm fantastic at all of this. Give me 4 or 5 stars across the board. Like, I'm great, solid, put me in, coach. And so then what happens is we aren't any better than we were, right before we took the survey. So I talked to owners and managers to really kind of flip it a little bit and say, okay, we are going to put a focus on training. And so to do that, we want you to be really honest in this survey and this self-assessment, because it's going to allow us to sign you up for the appropriate trainings. It's going to make sure we get you added to the appropriate schedule and things like that. Typically, that will help for the most part. You're going to see a little bit more honesty. You're going to see those technicians being eager because you've promised them training. They're excited now. But you're still going to have some techs that are going to say, yeah, I know everything. And that's where those dashboards come in, because we look at the self-assessment, which is what the technician feels they're confident in. And then the manager also rates them on the same skills, on what the manager feels they're confident in. And we can start seeing trends of, okay, who is aligned and who maybe needs to have a deeper conversation because they're not on the same page.
For sure. That's incredible insight. So I'm assuming that you have kind of out of the box, self-assessments or manager assessments. Like talk a little bit about what kind of resources you have to just kind of plug and play with contractors.
Yeah, so we've got the self-assessments. We do truck inspections. We do tool inspections, which I've hit on. The onboarding workbooks, those are very plug and play. So we brand everything to the company. And again, we've actually added to that. So now it's not just technicians. We've got CSR onboarding workbooks. We've got dispatch onboarding, and we even have new manager. So like if you are succession planning and you're trying to prep an employee to be a new manager, or you're welcoming in somebody externally, we've got these workbooks that literally walk them through their first 4 weeks of like, okay, what's a P&L? How do I read it? What do I do? So
Wow, that's incredible.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that feedback. I'm going to drop the free resource that you're offering, that link in the chat one more time. If there's no other questions, I'd love to hear if your closing thoughts. Is there anything you want to, urge people to do, or maybe take the first step, or maybe where they could find you?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I always like to kind of end with one final question. If you, one way to kind of make sure there's retention analysis, and like one way to kind of seal up a training, I always ask for ahas. So if you guys would love to kind of share in the chat, just like, what's your one takeaway from this session that you're like, yes, that was my aha moment. That was, I'm glad I participated because I learned that. So I love to kind of close out with that.
Yeah, for sure. Love to see what people are going to type in the chat. And just, from my perspective, I think those new kind of KPIs that you outlined, like how are we closing the gap between, what the company cares about in terms of, revenue generation, but like how are the people that we're employing helping us achieve that? So I think those new KPIs are something that are really incredible that I'm going to figure out how to fold into what we're doing here at Breezy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris Miller says tracking the tech support calls so that we can offer training to the technicians. And
Yeah,
then Elaine says the workbooks.
definitely. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think, and that's a huge thing. Like you said it right. Like At the end of the day, if you talk to a technician or you talk to an employee that's on kind of that level in your business and your org chart, do they care about average ticket? Do they care about revenue? Maybe a little bit. I mean, they care about their paychecks. But if you can find metrics that move those needles without them knowing it and it does directly impact them, you're going to get a bigger bang for your buck. So
100%. Yeah. And David says importance of sticking to a 2 to 3 week training agenda to keep them engaged long term.
yeah.
And just, more key takeaways for me is that, we want to be the leader that stands by their word, right? And looking back at those kind of remind me again, buy-in bucks, or kind of that analogy that you made, right? Like if we're saying we're going to do something as an employer, we need to back that up, because people want follow through and people want to know that they're working with someone, for someone that does what they say, right?
Exactly.
That's trust. And then the other thing is, velocity is so important. And when you can see something at a glance that is a red flag, instead of having to scour through data, it's incredibly helpful at solving the problem immediately or putting more resources into what's working really well, right? So that was something that I really took away from your presentation, and I really appreciate you bringing all of that new information to us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. If you guys are active on LinkedIn at all, I'm very active there. So again, my name is Danielle Wernert. You can follow me there, or just shoot me a message. My website is just upskilledconsulting.com. And I look forward to kind of following all of your guys' journey, and don't be strangers, because I want to see what you implement and where that takes you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Danielle. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I am going to leave you with one final opportunity to sign up for next show, which is November 6th. We're going to be bringing on sales expert Michael Johnson to share the 2026 Profit Playbook and show you how to build a clear plan for maximum growth next year. So, my friends, thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.